Since Speaking Task 8 contains an image, it requires a slightly different approach than speaking tasks with just text. For the text-based tasks, you may be required to answer a question or give advice or a detailed opinion about something. For this task, though, you've got to focus more on descriptions. Let's see how the Level 7 speaker and the Level 12 speaker handled Speaking Task 8. Note that the following few screens will be using pieces of the transcript from each response. If you'd like to view these transcripts in more detail, you can access them as a PDF download alongside this video. First, let's examine what the speakers have in common. Both speakers organized their responses quite well and mentioned some of the same details. They each state that the situation is occurring outside. They mentioned that they're watching some people playing a game with balls and sticks, that everyone is wearing some sort of historical costume, and that they're riding on wheeled vehicles. Both speakers also invite their friend, Adam, to join them at the end of the response, and they finish within the time limit. So, in terms of overall organization, both speakers handle things pretty well. As you'll see, the main differences lie in how detailed the speaker's ideas actually are. Before we launch into the differences, though, we'll touch on one last thing that both speakers have in common: self-correction. That is, both speakers go back and rephrase parts of their response. For example, the Level 7 speaker tries to compare the players' costumes to Alexander the Great, a famous historical figure. But then, he decides to simply compare them to ancient warriors instead. The Level 12 speaker states that the red team is about to score, but then she corrects herself and says that it's the blue team. Of course, it's ideal if you can describe the situation without making any mistakes, but it's okay if you need to stop and rephrase something. This is worth considering, especially if you think it will improve the clarity of your response. Just be sure not to spend too much time doing so. Now, on to the differences. If we look at the responses more closely, we can see that the Level 7 speaker adds much less detail to each point than the Level 12 speaker does. To begin with, the Level 7 speaker states that he can see some people playing some game like polo. This is pretty vague. We're left wondering who these people are. Are they competing against each other? Are they on teams? Now here's the Level 12 response. The speaker sees some people playing a game that resembles cricket, and the players are in two teams, a blue team and a red team. This is much more detailed, and the listener has a better understanding of the situation. Remember that in Speaking Task 8, you're calling the listener on the phone, and the listener can't see what's going on. Therefore, you should try to be as descriptive as you can. If it helps, you could try playing back the two responses one more time, with your eyes closed. Is it harder to picture the Level 7 description than the Level 12 description? Now let's look at how each speaker describes the sports equipment. The Level 7 speaker simply says that the players are using a ball. Think about that word. Does it tell you anything about the situation? What kind of ball is it? What does it look like? How is it being used? The Level 12 speaker, on the other hand, is more descriptive. She describes it as a red ball, which the players are hitting with long sticks. Here, again, it's easier to picture things. And what about the vehicles the players are riding? The Level 7 speaker describes them simply as bikes. The correct term for this machine is scooter, but the speaker's use of bike isn't necessarily going to impact his score. Remember that Task 8 is about an unusual situation, so it's alright if you can't find the perfect vocabulary to discuss it. The important thing here is that the Level 7 speaker uses no description other than bike. The Level 12 speaker, however, describes the vehicles as scooters with big black wheels. This is a lot easier to imagine. In addition to the level of description, these two responses also differ in their use of interjections. Interjections are sounds we make when we're still thinking of what to say next. They're usually filler words like and It's totally fine if you use a few interjections in your response. Everyone does it. Just be careful not to overuse them. Here's a piece from the Level 7 response. Can you see all the interjections he uses just in the first couple sentences? Using interjections to this extent can make your response much harder to follow. And here's a piece from the Level 12 response. Note that although the speaker does use a few interjections, they aren't nearly as frequent. So in summary, what are the main reasons why one response scored Level 7 and one scored Level 12? The biggest factor here is the amount of description in the response. The Level 7 speaker includes vague and minimal details about the scene. This makes it quite hard for the listener to imagine the picture. The Level 12 speaker, on the other hand, is much more specific in her descriptions, thereby adding to the clarity of her response. The Level 7 speaker also uses a few too many interjections. This makes his response harder to follow, whereas the Level 12 speaker keeps her interjections to a minimum. It's also good to remember what both responses do correctly. They both introduce the situation clearly, describe the basic setting, and finish speaking in time to give a proper conclusion, without being cut off. And they both correct themselves to further clarify their response. Just be careful not to correct yourself too often, or you'll run out of time.